That's a major contribution. I would recommend everyone to do the same. Get your CEO to spell those weird numbers and because that's where we're stuck. The top management doesn't know V6, so it won't be deployed. So, Tom, I don't think you need introduction, but you need maybe a little device.
There we go.
Because he's a mobile speaker, as you all know.
And, oh, I need my presentation, in fact.
Your bio is so long, I might, if I start reading it, you won't have time to speak.
How do you use a Windows machine? Well, yeah. Where's the little Priso button? Is it that? Diporama. Okay. Français.
It should be.
Oh, you couldn't see that, actually. All right, good. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Ute, for a great presentation on the technical aspects of V6 and mobile. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the business case of IPv6, because that's how you get your CEO to say, we're going to support IPv6. If you're a CEO in this room, this presentation is for you. If you work for a CEO, this is a presentation for you to take to your CEO, okay? So we're going to talk about, by the end of this presentation, I hope to convey at least 3 clear business cases with material that you can go back and look at in white papers, et cetera, okay, with real data behind it. And then you can go and use that. So before we do that, how many of you were here at the first mobile world, not mobile, V6 World Congress 2 years ago in 2011? Great. So about 1/3 of you, it seems like. So this is a picture from that conference, and yes, indeed, we did have Steve Deering there. That was mentioned earlier by the gentleman from Cisco, and Bob Hendon. And that's what you see on the left side of the screen here. On the right side, you see Lorenzo Colletti from Google, Don Lee from Facebook, and John Brzezowski from Comcast looking none too happy because they were busy actually stepping off and deploying this stuff. Remember 2 years ago, it was just 2 years ago, we didn't have yet any operators that were deploying IPv6 by default to their customers. We didn't have Quad A's for the entire world from Google, from Facebook, et cetera. And we had just run out, within a week, of IPv4 addresses from IANA. So the world was very different then. We had just also announced the World IPv6 Day was coming, the test day. Not the launch, but the test day. So Lorenzo asked questions like, why didn't you make this thing backwards compatible? And Steve had a really interesting response saying, well, it's not that it wasn't backwards compatible, it's that IPv4 wasn't forwards compatible. He did a really nice job of explaining that. Something else that happened at that conference, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, this is the last photo of random people that you're going to see. Something else that happened at that conference is Free Telecom, that's Alexander Kassin. He's not here today because he's too darn busy. One of the things that he announced there, you can read it on the quote, at that conference he said, okay, we are going to give IPv6 by default to all new customers. And that was a huge step that was necessary for other people to follow. You got to have that first one to step off, right? Like Google did for content, Free did for wireline, and we're going to talk about wireless in just a bit. So this speaks loudly to your CEOs. Oh, someone else did it, and they didn't die, right? So one thing, this traffic graph that you see here is the actual real data from their 6RD border relays. One of the ways that Free was able to deploy so quickly is they used a transition technology called 6RD, which I'm a big fan of. If you're unable to support native IPv6, 6RD is probably your best solution out there. In the period of time since he made that announcement, they've seen a 10x increase in IPv6 through their border relays on their network. That's a good business case to us, Cisco, for the border relay department. Bad business case, I guess, to the CGN department, but it all balances out. how many were at the Second World Congress? 2012. We had been through a World IPv6 Day, and one of the slides, that's a slide from 2012, I made the bold prediction, I kind of knew, but a bold prediction that some unnamed ISP was going to follow in the footsteps of free telecom and deploy IPv6 by default to many users using similar technology, and that they were so big, they were going to knock free off the top of the list. And they did. By the end of 2012, I said they would, and they did. So this is the measurements from ISOC. Now, I'm not allowed to say the name of the ISP. That's why it's a large unnamed ISP. But this is public information. You can go out and type in that URL yourself, and oh, well, you know, maybe it's this one with the 3 little letters there in the acronym that knocked free off its pedestal. Free was still the first, but these guys managed to get IPv6 deployed because somebody else had done it before and because we had a business case. So this is some of the traffic that we've seen. Thank you very much, Google, for the charts. And yes, I recolored them. There's some sort of fuchsia pink or something in their tool. But this is deployment, just rock solid, on and on and on and on and up. This is what Google sees in terms of percentage of IPv6 from this particular operator, from this particular AS. So on World IPv6 Day, they handily beat the 1% goal set by the industry and then continued up to close to 10% now. Maybe in a month or two, it'll go past that. So in order to get that 10% traffic, of course, they have to deploy to far more than 10% of their customers, right? Because you've got home gateways that don't support IPv6, you've got computers that don't support IPv6, and every time those non-IPv6 end devices go to Google via IPv4, even if it's from an IPv6 home, it counts against this percentage, okay? So it's a really significant rollout of IPv6. So take that one to your boss as well. This conference is about mobile. So now we have a mobile v6 business case. So I didn't show you before, but that slide that I had, well, I'm sorry. This is the wireline review, back up. This is the wireline use case from last year. I put this slide up last year, and you can now download the actual business case. It wasn't available last year in February. So now it's available. You can go to that link, and you can download the wireline use case, which I used to help convince that other ISP. Not only has someone else done it and not died, there's a business case behind it. There's a CapEx business case. And basically what it involves is all the traffic that goes over IPv6 doesn't go through that carrier-grade NAT. So it's a CGN bypass. That was the business case that really changed the minds of that particular operator. So we can apply the same thing to mobile CGN. If you have a separate carrier-grade NAT infrastructure in order to support your mobile clients, and you want to stop feeding that with more and more and more session state, we did an analysis. This one should be published this week with the help of IDC and a couple of other unnamed mobile operators in order to put together a model, a CapEx model. This is not OpEx. So maybe Cameron will be talking more about OpEx in his talk. But this is a CapEx model around CGN. And what you see in the green bars is the model for where no IPv6 is deployed. So you're just building out more and more and more NAT. And you see in the yellow and the blue model, two different ways, either IPv6 only with a NAT 6.4 or dual stack. And you see there's not a whole lot of difference between these two models in terms of CapEx, because both of them offload that same NAT 4.4 CGN, okay? So these are two different models. I think you'll hear Verizon talk about one model, and you'll hear T-Mobile talk about another model, and both are valid in terms of CapEx reduction. This is real session state from a real mobile network, and that's what we're out to attack. It's growing and growing and growing and growing with no bounds, and If this network has a IPv6 beta program now, if this network were to deploy IPv6 to all of its customers, you would see that session state drop by half, right? Because more than 50% of the traffic from that operator network goes to websites that have IPv6 on by default. So that's what this is about, killing the CGN. So, remember when I said that Free Telecom made that step forward in wireline? Well, Verizon is the one that gets the prize for making that step forward in mobile. And again, thank you, Google, for the chart here. Thank you, Verizon, for letting me put it up here. And Samir will be talking more in detail about it during his talk. But look at this, 30% nearly, 29% of the traffic that Google sees from this Verizon wireless network is all coming in over V6. So that's not peanuts anymore, right? So this is pretty significant, and it could even be more, and maybe during the measurements panel on Friday, Google will let you know how it could be more pretty quickly. So we could see that number go up a lot more. A little preview there. So what's Cisco been doing? Been eating our dog food. So again, Google's data. We've got, this is our campus network where we're deploying IPv6. We're about 8% now. That reflects maybe about 20% of our offices around the world. There's 500, 600 offices that have IPv6 dual stacked on them, the largest ones first. And we're progressively rolling it out office by office by office. So that's why you're not seeing 100% yet. But this is 1 year of growth, and we expect it to continue. And we've actually got some host issues in some of our Macs and things like that that count against the statistics. So we might even see some jumps that go up over the next few months. But we've been working hard on this, and I'm going to go through some other things that we've been doing in terms of the dog food department. Last year at World IPv6 launch, we focused on putting Quad A's on Cisco.com, on WebEx.com, on Linksys.com, et cetera, right? But we didn't actually put the collaboration WebEx service over v6. Now we do. So this is a brand new thing, and we're actually deploying it to ourselves first. If you see this little cisco.webex.com, that means if you're a Cisco employee, WebEx is one of Cisco is one of WebEx's largest customers, naturally. So if I set up a WebEx and any of you dial into it, you don't have to be on the Cisco VPN. This is on the internet. Then you'll use this URL of cisco.webex.com, you'll get a Quad A, and you'll start using v6. So in this case, we're dog fooding it ourselves before we turn around and give it to all of our customers. So we're running in sort of this beta mode for now, but it is production, it is up, it is on by default, and in some number of months, whenever this is, we deem it ready for everybody else, we'll be deploying it to Ron Bursma over the DoD, et cetera. In fact, you might even have one of the betas running. So a few customers, we let Ron in. So we've also been measuring IPv6. This is a little project started by one of my students at École Polytechnique last year and run by Anna Fiocco, who's hiding in the back of the room. What we're trying to do with this, we don't have much of our own statistics to pull from, but we can pull from everybody else's and package it all together by saying, in a particular country, if you add up transit operators, end users, content availability for the country, the top sites in that country, et cetera. If you put all that together in sort of an index, this is what you get. And there's a new little nifty widget that we're going to be popping around in advertisements on mobile phones, et cetera, and then you can click through to it to go look around. Country, governments, et cetera, can use this. The OECD is very interested in it. So to kind of give this sort of competition going between the different countries to try to help spur adoption. There's a long list of stuff that we've been doing. Again, you can talk to Alain about that, or you can, if you have complaints about a particular v6 feature, I'll introduce you to our new IPv6 product manager, also hiding back there, Steve Simlow. Okay, back to technology a little bit. Everybody know what this thing is? I think this was Steve that first presented it. This is the IP hourglass model, right? The big, large, complex systems, whether it's the internet or biological systems, et cetera, exhibit this kind of central cell type model that end up building the complex systems below and above. So that's what we have here in IP. IP runs on top of everything, everything runs on top of IP, and voila, you get this massive scalability. That's what we have today with IPv4, and it's in transition to IPv6. And what we're going to hear about tomorrow, I believe in the afternoon, is a lot of new IPv6 architectures, IPv6 only architectures. Because these IPv6 only architectures are the ones that give you the OpEx savings. So the CGN bypass was the CapEx savings. The IPv6 only is the OpEx savings, whether it's a v6 only mobile network or some of the automation in the cloud. You'll hear from Paul Zawacki from Oracle, or the IPv6 only data center work that Tori Anderson has been doing, or segment routing from Clarence Fiesfies coming over from MPLS land over into IPv6 land for us. I'll be talking about MAP. Benoit Lordelais will be talking about Lightweight 4.6. And also we'll be hearing from Deutsche Telekom, their new TerraStream model, which is heavily v6 invested all the way through, where IPv4 ends up running just as a service on top. So these are real serious business cases in terms of looking out and saying, look, if we deploy v6, we can do all this other stuff. So be paying attention for that tomorrow, I believe. Finally, I want to move in to our third big business case. We talked about OpEx and CapEx type things. What about chasing new revenue? There's this new stack being built that's IPv6 only in the center. There isn't an IPv4 definition even for what's called 6LoWPAN, which is IPv6 over low power networks. And it's the only the only way you run IP over 802.15.4, which is the Ethernet's low power infrastructure, is with IPv6. So these are your sensors, your metering, this kind of stuff. Really tiny, tiny things. And that's how you get up to the 50 billion numbers. That new stack skipped right over IPv4. It's sort of like in developing countries when they say, oh, let's forget this building out our copper infrastructure. We're just going to go straight to wireless. It's the same kind of thing in this world. There's a whole lot of proprietary sensor networking, et cetera, et cetera. They're moving to IP, and they're just hopping right over IPv4, and that new infrastructure is building up in IPv6. So our challenge is, as we look in the past, this way, we look in the past. We started out deploying the internet on IPv4 for the first 10 years, and this slide, maybe it was longer than that. The next sort of wave of innovation or wave of growth came with mobility, bring your own device. That was built on the back of IPv4 and NAT, because there was no way to reach that growth with IPv4 only. The next wave, and that's what we're in right now, is built on the back of IPv6. So it's a mixture of the IPv6 launch, the IPv6 transition of the human internet, and the IPv6 built from scratch for the Internet of Things. Those two things working together, and eventually meeting at the top where you have the IP, the IP over everything, or IPv6 everywhere. So what is IP over everything? You're going to hear a lot about this in Cisco's marketing. You're hearing it from other companies as well. It's basically people, processes, datas, and things all talking together, communicating together in ways that you never thought possible, that you never imagined, yada, yada, yada. It's all about chasing new markets, new efficiencies, and going after $14.4 trillion. Where's that number from? Hence the big business case number 3. This is a report published by Cisco, popularized by Cisco. You'll be seeing this if you watch any of our advertising and marketing, et cetera, you're going to see this over the next few months. It's about enabling the next generation, the IP over everything. And the Internet of Everything. And it's a 10-year period where massive changes in industries take place, and we're capturing up to $14.4 trillion in efficiencies. So a big number there. Your CEO likes the big numbers. To back it up, 21 use cases. Go download the document, there's the PDF, and you can go through each and every one. There's all sorts of math behind why it's like this. It's kind of marketing math, honestly, but still, it's a big numbers, speaking in dollars, not technology. So there's a few examples: smart factories, almost $2 trillion of opportunity, smart grid, smart buildings. There's even stuff about advertising. Maybe Google would care about that, et cetera. There's 21 of them. And I know it sounds kind of crazy, right? $14.4 trillion, internet connected everything. But read what Professor Nelson has to say about this. Trying to determine the market size for the Internet of Things is like trying to calculate the market for plastics back in 1940. Now, if you were in the plastic business, you might be saying, oh, it's going to be everywhere. And everybody was like, what are you talking about? I like my wood. You know, I like my metal. Forget it. Plastic, yucky. Can't imagine it being in everything. Well, sure enough now, obviously, it is in everything. So I think if you can communicate that parallel, that like, oh, wow, there's something coming that's bigger than I'm actually imagining. So, top 3 reasons to deploy IPv6 today. First one, CapEx-based. CGN bypass, real-world use cases, and examples of operators that have deployed and are actively moving their traffic off of the NATs and into native IPv6 for wireline and for wireless. The second thing, new architectures, more scalable, more automated, easier to manage. They're talking about SDN and stuff over there. One of the our top architects for MPLS SDN, Clarence, looked at this problem and said, yeah, okay, I want to do all this SDN stuff on the network. We want to open up the interfaces to be able to manage it better. Well, wow, you know, if I had IPv6 everywhere in here, it would be a lot easier. And that's one of the things he's going to be talking about. And finally, so that's OpEx related. Finally, the preparing for the Internet of Everything. So the Internet of Things is sort of, to a lot of operators that operate the human internet, the Internet of Things has sort of been this thing that's often been in academia, or it's been proprietary, or maybe it just, you know, ends up being run by some application that collects all the data, and then it connects to the internet afterwards. That's what's changing now, because that industry is not only about to boom, it's moving over from proprietary protocols to IP protocols, and they're skipping right over IPv4. So those two things are building up, and that's where I leave you today. It's our job to go overlook at those Internet of Things guys and make sure that they pay attention to the human internet that's transitioning to the same thing that they're building from. While at the same time, they need to go over and pay attention to the operators of the human network and make sure that their technologies come together so we have one hourglass at the end rather than two. So we have an Internet of Things, not a bunch of intranets of things, right? So IPv6, setting the stage for the Internet of Everything. And every time you see Internet of Everything messaging from Cisco, look right beneath it, you're going to see IPv6. That's coming over the next month or two. We're connecting it all back to IPv6, because without IPv6, we don't have an Internet of Everything. Thank you. Any questions?
So trillions of dollars, huh? That's a better convincing story. Nobody can count those numbers anyway, huh? So yeah, we always thought about billions, but now it's trillions. Any questions? So we have 2. And we have little Mike over there at the front.
I'm just going to get a glass of water while you ask.
Can you please raise your hand? Yes. He was faster than you. You're on the next one. Tough question, please.
Yeah.
Hi, Nick Heatley from EE in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of got 2 questions, actually, if that's okay. The first
right.
one, well, both of them are kind of issues, really. Do you see that when you take the CGN out in a mobile operator, that you don't have anything stateful, because it's all about the data bundles at the moment. You know, we've launched a 4G tariff where voice is toll-free, SMS is toll-free. It's all about the data bundles. So, you know, the idea that you can get a lot of data being sucked down there could blow out someone's data allowance. So it's a big concern. So, you know, you might see NAT disappearing, but are you actually going to see no stateful device there?
In the near term, and actually in the medium term as well, I believe that you will continue to see stateful P gateways, so to speak, right? Devices that are controlling the flows, doing the billing, all that kind of stuff, but this is done separately from the NAT, right? The study that we published along with IDC and the mobile operators are based on an architecture where you have the stateful gateways for all the things that you were talking about, for service delivery, et cetera, but then you have a separate CGN for the actual, you know, natting of IPv4 addresses in order to get the amplification of IPv4 addresses. And it's that separate infrastructure that we're trying to get rid of. The other one will remain as long as it needs to remain for the particular services, right? I think that the Internet of Things can't support that level of state in order to scale to the 50 billion. That's my personal belief, and that mobile operators need to be looking at that to try to figure out, right, 10 years from now, what the Internet's going to look like in terms of monetizing, et cetera, with these devices that are super tiny and the number of connections are orders of magnitude beyond what we have today, okay? But for now, all we're trying to do is make sure that the NAT part goes away, and then you keep all the other flows for, you know, whatever service, you know, enablement that you need.
So the other question, the other issue really is we've gone to our marketing department and we said we're going to do IPv6 and we're going to do it seamlessly, and they've said that that's great. And by the way, can you make sure that the data allowances don't change?
Right. Well,
so
other than the size of the header, it shouldn't.
The size of the header.
And
10% difference, you know, that's revenue lost effectively, because we've got to suck that up in the network. So.
Well, 10%, if you're not charging just for headers, you're charging for the data, the whole packet. And maybe not, I don't even actually know if you're charging for the actual header or not. But in fact, Alessandro from Cisco is going to be speaking more about the service architectures, et cetera, going forward, and maybe you could pose that question to him.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. He's next to you.
So this increasingly darkening cloud, is that where the gazillion of dollars are going to be, or is it going to be in the access networks?
This increasing cloud, is that where the
darkening cloud?
Darkening cloud. What darkening cloud?
Oh.
I thought I was painting a bright future.
Yeah.
We're going to get rid of the darkening cloud of NAT.
But no, I'm thinking about the darkening cloud of content delivery networks.
Well,
thickening up with information.
So content delivery is something that generally is something that's delivered to a human eyeball, and it gets first-class treatment, right? Whether it be cached inside your network or delivered through some service gateway that's making sure to charge for it or what have you, right? It gets first-class treatment because there's a human eyeball behind it for that one connection. There's a one-to-one relationship between connection and a human, and humans are what we're after, because humans make decisions about money and make money move, right? In the Internet of Things, to get to the 50 billion, of course, they're machines talking to each other or little tiny, tiny devices talking to each other. And here, the only caching is for optimization purposes, right? So you want to be able to, the device needs to wake up and go back to sleep a week later, but the data needs to still be accessible somewhere in the cloud, right? So I don't see that as a darkening cloud. I see that the network, as it moves to IPv6 and has end-to-end reachability, the proxies or the CDNs go where they need to go for optimization, for billing, for whatever reasons, but they're not going where they have to be because, doggone it, we don't have enough addresses. It separates these problems and allows you more flexibility and more growth. Is that fair?
I think he's convinced. He's just cheesing you a bit. So can I listen to his talk? One more question. Glad. So, thank you very much. Round of applause.
Thank you.